all stories should be based on character, in my opinion. Um, Even if there's a plot or world that's fascinating, we need to see that kind of focus through the journey of something or someone that we care about as an audience. And so character is kind of the number one thing. And that character, ultimately, one of the most kind of simple ways to think about character in a story is that it's really all about what is going to get this character to change. Stories are about change in some way, and discovery and understanding. And typically, the main character changes. Sometimes you've got the world that changes because of the main character, but usually the character changes in some way or grows or all that stuff. And this is the number one thing that I think people forget about, is that people don't want to change unless they have to. And even then, they usually don't want to change. And it's hard to change. You know, even if you need to change, like health reasons or whatever, it's very, very hard to change. And so sometimes I think people kind of forget that when, you know, they'll be like, okay, well, I need to have a character and I need to put my character in conflict, you know, and so that conflict has an antagonist or some kind of antagonizing force or something that happens to the character. That's great. We need conflict. But what's interesting about conflict is that while there might be an external conflict going on that is forcing the character to do things differently and experience things differently and act differently, there is also an internal conflict that the character is struggling with because they ultimately don't want to change. They're being forced to change by these outside forces. And that internal conflict is really interesting to kind of set up. And you can kind of break it down simply as like kind of dominant forces or major traits. And we were talking about it today in directing class, where like in Star Wars A New Hope, we don't even meet Luke Skywalker, the main character, until 15 minutes into the movie or whatever. But you know right off the bat what he wants to do, what his goals are. He wants to be a pilot. He wants to fight the Empire. He essentially wants to be a hero. And that is kind of what he really wants to do. And his uncle says, no, we need you to help out in the farm. And while it is, that is an external kind of force, Luke could say, well, screw you, I'm going to do it anyways. But he doesn't, because internally, Luke values family. And that those two values are like competing within him. Those two desires, those two wants. He wants to be a family person, but he also wants to go out and save the day. And to a certain extent, the wanting to go out and save the day also feeds into that family value as well. He wants to save his family. He wants to save the farm. He wants to help out. He wants to be the hero in the small life that he has right now. So they kind of work together, but then they also can create this conflict, right? And so if you think about what is that internal conflict that is preventing your character from changing, that might help inform some of the external things that are happening to this character. There's a saying that, people don't change until the fear of staying the same is greater than the fear of change. There's so much fear of changing, and there's so much inertia, and there's so much difficulty in changing as human beings, that people don't change just because they woke up one day and they were like, you know what, I'm going to do something totally differently than I normally do. There has to be a reason, there has to be something. And even if people choose change, like I, really want to go to the Olympics, or I really want to enter this competition or something, even if you're choosing a challenge or choosing change, there are still those kind of internal conflicts that I think just make a richer story and that you can kind of play off on, because at the end of the day, whatever's going on with the plot, we want to see how this character changes by the end of it. And that is internal work. It's not just because the experiences they had with these external forces made them a better person. You can still be a terrible person after going through an ordeal, but if they learned something or grew or changed, we need to kind of see how that is affecting them, and that's really their internal work. And so finding ways to showcase that is key.